I think we're live on YouTube too. Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back. Really excited about my guest today. My guest today is Joel Thomas from Free the Rabbits podcast, and I found out about Joel from I was watching my friend recently, and Juan's been on my show a lot of times, and so I'll check out like occasionally the guests Juan has. And when Joel was on there, he blew me away with his knowledge. And then if you go to his YouTube page, which is called Free the Rabbits, he has a lot of good information on basically, all things like ancient conspiracy. But it's not really conspiracy because it's like when he's talking about these things about Nephilim and stuff, he's proving it to be right. It's right there in the scripture. It's like just people aren't seeing it for what it is, and maybe he can explain that. But he's an amazing esoteric researcher. He's a musician and he's a cryptid hunter. And I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show for the first time. Joel, thank you so much for coming on, man. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Rob?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on. This is really a treat. But I wanted to ask you, how did you all get started in all this? Like, what drove your fascination for like the esoteric and stuff like that?
Well, when I was a kid, I was always fascinated with UFOs, cryptids, Bermuda Triangle, and my parents encouraged that. So it was never frowned upon in my family to think outside of the box or think critically. My family's always been the type to look at things from a critical mind and look at what's really going on in the world. And, I used to ask questions all the time. What about Bigfoot? What about these UFO sightings? And I remember my mom used to buy me these books. As a matter of fact, recently she sent me a picture of some old books that I had back when I was like 5 or 6 years old. One of them was called The Portal, and the other one was called Breakfast for Bigfoot, which was like a kid's book about Bigfoot. So it's pretty funny. And I'd forgotten about those books, but I've been into this stuff for my whole life. And I would say when I really started to get into more of the esoteric knowledges and more of the occult route as far as research goes, I was older. And just a little background about my family. My dad is a preacher, has been my whole life, still is. And when I got to a certain age in my early 20s, I turned my back on a lot of those teachings. And I went a pretty dark path for a while. I became a Freemason. I went down a lot of different roads trying to attain this knowledge that I wanted to obtain, right? It wasn't just that, but I was a musician. So, I went down this road, kind of the height of when hip hop was talking about the Illuminati, and people like Jay-Z and Kanye and all these guys were showing all of these symbolisms within their music videos. And you could track them back to the 90s when, especially Jay-Z, when he was a part of secret societies and some of his earlier works where he talked about it. So for me, I felt like that was a route to get to where I wanted to in life as far as, fame, money, power. And I say that now, but I will say that I've had time to reflect over the past few years and understand really what I was trying to do. I really was more interested in the knowledge. The hidden knowledges was what I was always interested in. And I think I always had this viewpoint of there was a small sect of people in the world that understood what was really going on. And then there was a larger mass of people that didn't really see the truth. And in my hubris, especially in my 20s, where I felt like I knew, more than most people around me, I would rather have been the person to control those people as opposed to trying to help them. Because to me, it felt like a lost cause. And I feel like for a lot of people these days, it feels like a lost cause, especially when you're so far down the rabbit hole and you feel like you have a grasp on a lot of what's going on globally, geopolitically, and occultic. I think that that's where we get this idea that, we're isolated, we're alone, and people go different paths, right? Some people go the path of, you know, basically hibernation, like a bear. They stay in their house all day and they never go outside, touch grass, like connect with, their fellow man. And you got people that, go into power and they want to control those people because they feel like they're, smarter or more intelligent. And I think that was part of the reason I wanted to. But I can say I had some pretty defining moments in my life that turned me away from those paths, my children being a big part of that, and me wanting to be there for them and set more of an example. And then I started really connecting to people on the ground level and just understanding that, man, we're all just trying to, figure it out, and we're all just trying to make it. Even the people that we laugh at and call sheep because they're so blind to what's going on, they're still people. They still have feelings. They still are trying to make it day to day. And I think that once I figured that out, I really had a huge shift on how I wanted to uh, interact with the world around me and what I wanted to do for people, as opposed to being some, demiurge, controlling everyone. So I feel like that was really my path. And I would say over the past, 4 to 5 years, I really shifted more into what I felt like was my calling and what I needed to do. I met a really cool person, Tony Merkel from the Confessionals, who runs a massive podcast, and he met me through music, and he and I became really good friends. And one day, on the off chance that I was into this stuff, he hit me up and said, "Hey man, I need another person to go with me on this trip to hunt dog man in the Daniel Boone National Forest. Do you want to be part of this documentary?" I was like, man, I'm all down for that. I grew up in the mountains of Georgia. So yeah, for sure. So we went on that trip, had some amazing things happen on that trip, and it just set off a chain of documentaries that we're about to shoot our sixth one next week. So we've got a lot in the pipe. I shot a massive documentary over the summer that had a ton of research that I did on Aleister Crowley and his connection to a specific cryptid phenomena in the United States, specifically when he was here. And I connected with guys like Isaac Weishaupt, Ayala from the One on One podcast, and all of us came together with different research. And then there was boots on the ground too, where we actually went to these 4 locations looking for the specific cryptid. So it was about a month of shooting. It went really well. But yeah, that's kind of how I went from A to Z, I guess, would be in the condensed form of what you asked.
Yeah, I mean, what I was really interested in, see, one of my big awakening points was the story of the Anunnaki. Like, I'm 44 years old. So, like,
Yeah.
I'd always tell people, I used to listen to Art Bell when I was young. And I was like you, I was always into, like, UFOs and the paranormal. So, I was always listening to Art Bell back when it was on the radio and then internet radio. And then I kind of followed, like, UFO and paranormal radio my whole life. But then in 2015, I had, like, a reawakening when I found out about the Anunnaki because I was like, how could they have lied to us about our history? But then you find out as you get deeper into conspiracies that some of that stuff about the Anunnaki might not be right. And then I was like looking at some of your stuff where you talk about like, Jesus is a homunculus and then the good Nephilim and stuff. And I connect the Nephilim kind of to the Anunnaki. It seems like that they might have been one and the same. And that's where I really dig your research. Like, I definitely want to get into cryptids too, but like, what made you get into all that, like the ancient history stuff and like would you say you look at it from more of a Christian perspective, or would you just say like an esoteric perspective, or do you not even label it? And sorry if that was a lot. That was
No, absolutely. I appreciate the questions. I would say definitely a Christian perspective. I think that I have the unique ability of having spent a ton of time practicing the occult and being a part of that world, and then coming out of that into a more Christian perspective. So I don't disavow what these occultists have learned and what these occultists are talking about, but I do look at it as basically the symbolism of the as above, so below. So what they're saying and doing isn't false. I just believe that it's on a negative spectrum. And I think that when I look at scripture and when I look at how things line up, especially when it comes to the esoteric part of scripture, because here's the interesting thing about the Bible is there's so much in that book that's not taught in mainstream churches at all. They won't even talk about it. And the Bible is a just mind-blowingly supernatural book. And I find it fascinating that there are Christians out there who will read that book and believe in an all creator and believe in a, you know, a divine being that connected with a human body that became Jesus, who died and rose again. They'll believe that craziness. But then when you start talking about fallen angels having relations with human women and creating Nephilim, and when you talk about all these hybrids that keep showing up throughout the Bible, and you talk about all these divination tools that are used throughout the Bible, they turn their nose up and scoff to it because it makes them feel uncomfortable because they don't understand it. And I think that if there were people out there teaching it better, I think people would be able to grasp it better. And I feel like that's part of my journey, and what I'm doing with Free the Rabbits is showing people how the Bible is this fantastical book that's based on a lot of historical facts and connects to all these other cultures and all these other religions. Because here's the thing, while I believe that the Bible is the inherent word of God, because that's me as a Christian, I don't disavow all these other books and all of these other lores. Like, I can look to Sumerian texts like the Ugaritic text and say that they're talking facts here. These gods existed. The Bible specifically talks about pantheon of gods. It talks about Yahweh and the divine council. Elohim judged the Elohim, and that's in Psalm 82:1. So all throughout the Bible, these Elohim are talked about, but yet we're not taught that because, you know, Christians are like, oh, that means that it's polytheism, but it doesn't. It just means that there's an unseen realm. There's a world that we don't see or we don't quite understand, that operates just like it does here in a hierarchy, a system of hierarchies where you've got different jobs for different people, and they all operate with free will just like us. So I think that once we start looking at it that way, it becomes a way more fascinating book. And it also makes all these other quote unquote mythologies make sense, where I don't think necessarily they're mythologies. I think they were talking about gods that interacted with people.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like there was once a time where gods walked with men. I would say definitely like the Sumerian times, and then maybe the Greek. You know, it seems by the time the Romans came, it seems like they were just copying the gods. But then what it seems like, it's interesting, is that pantheon of gods is like the same all around the world. Like, you know, like Enki is Poseidon in Greece, and he's Neptune in Rome, where Enlil is I can't remember, he's Ashur in Syria, and Enki's Ahura Mazda in Persia. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. And Thoth is Ninshita and Sumerian, and Thoth is Quetzalcoatl, possibly in the Aztec and Mexican. You know, so it's interesting, right? It makes me think they definitely existed, and I don't know. I mean, where do you start to trace the story where this all links together? What do you think it does? Like, do you think it all makes sense? Like, do you think maybe there were these gods, and then they actually spawned Nephilim, and also I wanted to follow up with that was, when you tell your stories, it seems like, or not, they're not even stories, they're reality, but like, it seems like there was a lot of weird stuff going on, like lion-headed people. I didn't even know about that, and also like possibly dogmen walking around back then, and huge people, Nephilim. It seemed like a whole different world. So again, sorry, a lot of questions there, but you know,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think probably the easiest way to kind of break it down would just be to look at what the Nephilim actually were, right? So you brought up the Anunnaki, right? And I think for me, when I first started doing research on the Anunnaki a long time ago, my original perception were that the Anunnaki were the Nephilim, right? So that was something that I know several theologians that think the same thing. But the more research that I did, I actually had more of an awakening on the Anunnaki actually being these Elohim, these gods, or these fallen angels, which I think they're two separate things. I don't think that fallen angels and these small g lowercase gods are the same thing. Now, I will say this though, the caveat is that the fallen angels, the demigods or the Nephilim, and even the spirits of the dead Nephilim, which I believe are demonic entities, I think they can all masquerade as gods as well. So I think that when you look through scripture or even in other religions, that you'll see them worship different types of gods, whereas they might not necessarily be these Elohim, part of this divine council of gods, but they could be entities that are showcasing their power to people and they're being worshipped as gods. So the Anunnaki, in my opinion, because they create, right? Part of the Sumerian lore in these Ugaritic texts is that they're creating. So, in my opinion, I play them more into these Elohim or these fallen angels. I think they're more in that category. Whereas I think the Nephilim are the products of these fallen angels or watchers, like in the book of Enoch, that come down to Mount Hermon and had relations with these women. It was more of a brokering of a deal, too, because essentially these watchers told the sons of men that if they could have their daughters, they would give them technology, right? That was the trade-off. And I think that actually plays a huge part into what's going on now too in the world, especially after 1947 at Roswell, when the world was basically awakened to these gray aliens that were running amongst us. And we saw a huge spike of technology after 1947. And we've all heard the stories of the Majestic 12 and some of these other groups that were supposedly created behind the scenes. But part of those stories is that we met with these aliens, and part of the trade-off was they would give us technology if we would give them access to people. Now, I don't know how true all of that is, but I can say it does match up very closely to the book of Enoch, because the book of Enoch does specifically talk about that, where it's basically they are giving, astrological charts to men. They're showing them how to use science, all of these things that these fallen angels are doing in return to have access to these women. And then from these women created these Nephilim, which in Genesis 6 is very evident, because that's where a lot of Christians will point to and say, well, where is it in the biblical text? I don't look at anything extra canonical. Where is it in the biblical text? Well, it's specifically talked about in Genesis 6, where it starts with verse 1. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any that they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. Now, that 120 years is basically stating from that point until the deluge. So that's about 120 years that Noah spent building the ark. That's what most theologians guesstimate there. Now, in verse 4, the Nephilim, it's the first time in the Bible the word Nephilim is actually used, were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Mighty men there is the word Gibborim, and Gibborim can be used interchangeably in the Hebrew, talking about giants, or it can be talking about heroic men. So that's where you'll get some people say, well, I don't think they're talking about giants here. Well, that doesn't give you the explanation for this Nephilim here that comes out of nowhere, because it doesn't make any sense. And then when you look at the sons of God, that is translated in the Hebrew to Beni Ha Elohim, which denotes that these are angelic beings that God created. These are the sons of God that are talked about throughout the Bible in different places where they show up. So they're not talking about human beings here. They're talking about angelic beings that connected with these human women and created these monstrous giants that ruled the antediluvian world, and they show up after the antediluvian world as well. And in my opinion, I think they're still around today. I did a entire 4-part series on the secrets of the Solomon Islands, and the people of the Solomon Islands have been talking about giants that have lived there for hundreds of years and that are still there. There are giant tribes that are subterrestrial that interact with people throughout the islands. There were actually giant wars on the islands during a period of time in the early 1900s, according, obviously, to the people who lived there.
Yeah, I was thinking. I'm trying to think of that explorer. His name. There was an explorer who encountered giants off the island of Patagonia. I can't think of his name now. It's escaping me. If anybody in the chat knows, it's interesting. It seems like they're around. But let me ask you this: you brought up a good point about the gray aliens, and then the Nephilim. Why do you think they always wanted to mate with us, or like they want our DNA? It seems like whether it's like some kind of angelic force or it's them sending gray aliens down. Because I'm trying to wonder where the gray aliens come from too. If they're like an offshoot of like because sometimes people say they're biological or they're not biological, but they're more robotic, So I wonder if that's just some aliens technology or something like that they send here. But it seems like they always want our DNA for whatever reason.
Right. And you're not wrong with that line of thinking. And I think that you can actually point to biblical text to explain why that they initially wanted to create these Nephilim. Now, we have to go to Genesis 6:9 to talk about Noah. Now, in Genesis 6:9, it says, "This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God." Now, the average person might read that and say, "Oh, well, he was a good person, right? He wasn't doing all the defilement of everyone around him. And God said, look, I'm going to spare you and your family. You're going to build this boat." We all know the story. And he hops in a boat with a bunch of animals, 40 days, 40 nights. It rains, covers the earth, and then it resides, and then he gets out with his family and they repopulate the earth. But when you look at it deeper in the Hebrew, blameless is tamim, and it means complete. It refers to animals which are without blemish. So in his generation, which is Bedo Ratau, the door stands for generation, but it actually means his DNA. So it means that he was perfect in his DNA. And the reason for that is because of these fallen entities who were having relations with women, creating these Nephilim, who also these Nephilim were having relations, and it continually was diluting the bloodline. Now, the reason why Noah needed to be spared was for Yeshua, Jesus, to come on this earth, because he had to come from a perfect bloodline, a perfect DNA. So the reason that the fallen angels, at the behest of Hillel, or as most people call him now, Lucifer, they wanted to destroy the bloodline so that he couldn't come. So that was why that Noah was spared, because everyone else had corrupted DNA. It didn't mean that he was a perfect man by any stretch. Nobody's perfect, but it meant that his DNA was perfect, and that's why he was spared. So I think initially, you asked the question, why did they want human beings? I think initially that's why. Now, I do think that after the flood, I think there may have been another incursion, possibly. I do think, though, that some of the giants of the Nephilim went underground into whatever you want to say it is, hollow earth or massive cavernous systems like the Mammoth Caves. It's possible, but they do reappear biblically a lot after the flood. But I do think that they kept procreating, and that's where probably these elite bloodlines, probably names we don't even know, that are behind the scenes. That's why they feel like they're elites. It's not because they have this money and power, which they do. It's because they feel like they come from the bloodline of the gods, which for all intents and purposes, they do, right? So if they're coming from these fallen entities, these, for lack of a better word, interdimensional, or some people think extraterrestrial beings, these angels that are connecting with humans, they are of the bloodline, right? So I think that after the flood, it wasn't so much they were trying to corrupt it to stop Yeshua from coming. I think now it's just all about corruption. I think that they want to take humanity down, or as much of humanity as they can down, without giving those people an opportunity to be restored, right, through Yeshua. And I think that's, again, to answer your question, I think initially that's how it started, but I think now it's just more about corruptive manner. And these great aliens are a part of that. Now, the great alien phenomenon is a loaded question, because we can look at it from multiple different angles, right? We can look at great aliens and say that they're a real thing, they're flesh and blood, and they are extraterrestrial, interdimensional. We could say that they are etheric. People have said they've seen them in the astral realms, or like Aleister Crowley in the Amalantra workings in New York with Rhodey and C.S. Jones, where he spent a year there trying to work the Amalantra workings, connecting to the wizard Amalantra. And while he was in there, he met the entity Lamb, which we've all seen the drawing of Lamb, and it looks like the typical gray alien. And it was the first drawing in the modern area of a gray alien. And that was the precursor to everything that went down the pipe from that drawing onward. So I do think that gray aliens have some sort of spiritual component to them. I think they're in that same pantheon of the Pleiadians and the Nordics and all of these humanoid type aliens that we connect with either in the astral realm or in the physical realm. I think they're all from the same place. I don't buy a lot of stock in all of these being some sort of extraterrestrial entities. I just feel like that they come with the same jargon. It's, we know what's best for mankind. We're here to save you. Do these things for us. Or in the gray alien sphere, they're not too nice. You never really hear too many great stories of gray aliens. And if they do start out good, they end pretty badly. And they are cold calculated. Some people think they're machine like. One of my biggest theories that I think I think that they are meat sacks. I think they are flesh and blood to a point, but I think they're created as meat sacks to host these Nephilim entities that roam the earth, these demonic entities that they can inhabit. And I think that they are abducting people to procreate, very much like they did in antediluvian times. They're just doing it in a more modern way. This is the modern way to do it, to make the modern man see it as extraterrestrial spaceships in this type of manner, whereas in antediluvian times, they presented themselves in a different way. I just think this is the rebranding that they've done in the modern era.
That's fascinating. Yeah. What do you think about reptilians? I mean, do you think they might be inner Earth or like? And do you put much stock in reptilians? Like, I mean, it seems like they're very. We don't hear about them as much, but it seems like they're very real, or there's some lore to them. But do you think, can we trace them back to the ancient times as well? I mean, I know. I just had David Icke's son on today, and you remember he did that documentary back in the day with Credo Mutwa, the African shaman. It was called the Reptilian Agenda, where that African shaman says back in the beginnings of time, the beginnings of man, that the reptilians were there, like that they had something to do with this, which is fascinating because it's like, where did those stories come from? There had to be some basis to it, right? Like, whether they were putting on a ruse and saying they were extraterrestrials or they're from inner Earth or they're from somewhere, it seems like they might have been here. I don't know, but what do you feel about the whole reptilian thing?
I think you got to buy some stock in it. I don't think we can throw it out. I don't think that's, especially, man, if we're sitting here talking about angelic beings having relations with women and creating giants. At that point, we have to open the floodgates. And I know that some researchers will point to the fact that these angelic beings were having relations not only with human beings, but also with animal kind as well. They were defiling the earth. So in that particular instance, they would have created these hybrids out of that, these chimeras in ancient times. And some people believe that their interaction with these serpentine like creatures, whether they were dragons or we'll just say even snakes, that they created these reptilians from that interaction. Now,
Wow.
I want to say this too, though, about the fallen angel relations, right? Some people think that it's actual sexual relations. I do think there's that component because there's been too many people that have been abducted and said that these things have happened to them when it comes to, whatever type of, interdimensional being that's doing this to them. So I think there's a component there, but I also think that these fallen angels have been around since, we're talking eons. They've had time to practice science. Like, they helped man with science. Now, I don't think man's stupid at all. I think we're on par with intellectually any of these beings. They just have time and practice over us. That's all it is. And man is also super, super impatient. So what we want is we want it now. We don't want to wait. So we're willing to broker deals with these entities to get access to the information. So at that point, they're getting access to be able to control us because we're allowing it, because we're trying to broker the deal to get some sort of uh, technology from them. So I do think that the uh, angelic beings in ancient times were DNA manipulating at least these animals. I don't know if it was necessarily relations in the way that we would understand it, but I think in a scientific realm that they were DNA manipulating a lot back then and creating a lot of weird things. I mean, we can look to so many different cultures with so many different chimeric type beings that, you know, most people will throw out and say that's mythology. But when you start digging around in these texts, especially biblically, and we'll talk about some of those animals today, that these were hybrids that people were running up on. They were super fast, super strong, and intelligent too. They weren't dumb beasts. So I think that we have to leave the reptilians as a major possibility. Now, I don't really know how they operate, right? We've heard that they're subterrestrial from a lot of people. I tend to think that that's probably true, and that also goes back to the Secrets of the Solomon Islands series I did, where I talked about Marius Boreaon and his time in the Solomon Islands, and all of these stories about reptilians and all of these gray aliens coming out from under the earth and all of these UFOs coming out from under the earth. So I do think that there's more evidence of these UFOs and these interdimensional beings or subterrestrials coming out from under the earth as opposed to out of space, right? We see more of that happening than the space phenomenon that we typically hear from at least the mainstream scientific field or the governmental departments, that's where they're coming from, right? I'm not throwing it out a possibility, right? But I'm just saying that we see more of it coming from out of under the earth. So yes, if we're going to take on board reptilians, I'm with you. I think they're probably coming from a subterrestrial place.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned is that they're coming. The UFOs are coming from the Earth, and they come from the oceans too. They have the USOs where it seems like off the coast of Catalina Island in California. That's a real active place for when and they just shoot right into the ocean like it's nothing. Like like there's no like our planes would just like boggle out and like die if we did that. But like these UFOs go seamlessly from air to water, and that's a great place to hide too. I've always said that like because I think some of our oceans are a lot more undiscovered than what we know about space, or they're about equal part because they go so deep that some man has never been under there. So I could see an alien base being under there or something like that. Have you ever looked into that? And what?
Yeah, no, for sure. I just brought up, and I keep going back to it, but it's so fascinating, the Solomon Islands. But that's what they
Yeah,
talk about there.
yeah, I want to
They're
know about that. That sounds interesting. What's going on there with the Solomon Islands?
So it's wild, man. So Marius Boreaon was a military individual out of Australia, and he ended up going to the Solomon Islands because he had retired from the military. He was a helicopter pilot for a while, and he had money saved up, and he was young, so he decides to go to the Solomon Islands. Just, hey, I want to go. So he goes there, ends up finding a wife there with one of the tribes, and as a part of that, he gets in close with the natives. And over a period of, I think it's about 5 years that he's there, he ends up learning a whole lot about what's going on there. As a matter of fact, within a few months, when he bought his first house, it was next to the water. His friend told him, hey, be careful of the diamond snake at night. He's like, diamond snake? What are you talking about? And he's like, no, there's a diamond snake out here. It snatches people up. And he thinks it's just some sort of, you know, island lore. He's not worried about it. But at night, they were out there fishing. And as they're starting to leave, this UFO comes skimming across the water, and he sees it, and immediately he knows that that's something mechanical. He picks it out, but the islanders think it's something that's biological. So he tells the close natives that he's related to, he sits them down one night and they have a conversation. He tells them what he knows that it is, at least through the research he's had, and him also being in the military. He seems to be privy to a lot of some information. And that's one of the things as I read the book, I really started thinking that there's there's a piece of it that maybe he was put out or told to write this book to put out information in a very governmental way, but at the same time come off as he's against the government, which he does, especially in the last 2 chapters. But he tells the islanders that these, diamond snakes are not anything biological, that they are machines, and he thinks something's running them. So he actually finds out where they're coming from. He looks in this mountain range, this inner island, and he decides that he's going to go trekking through the jungle. So he and his buddy John, they go trekking through the jungle, and they finally get there before dusk. And they look, so the area that this deep cave system that it's coming out of, there's a waterfall and there's a huge pool of water. Well, these UFOs start coming up out of the water, like out of the caves, out of the water, and then
Holy
they go.
shit.
Yeah, so they go out and he sees them leave, and then later on in the night, he watches them periodically come back, because I think he saw the first night he was there about 3 of them come out at separate times and then come back in. Now, the Islanders do talk about that these UFOs will attack them too, shoot out some sort of laser-like weaponry that could burn them. Many of the Islanders have been abducted as well that he talked to. But the other interesting part is the giant phenomena that is going on the island too. So there are these different tribes of giants that are clearly interacting with these subterrestrials because they're all coming out of the same area. However, they're not really in league together, if that makes any sense. They coexist, but they're not in league together. So the giants generally are cannibals. However, there was a giant called Luddy Makoti, and he was captured when he was 6 years old. He was about 6 foot, so he fit in with the rest of the islander. He was captured by some of the colonizers that were on the island, taken to Australia. He was bought into servitude by an old farmer and his wife. He gets there and he starts working for this man. Now, he's the only person that's working for this man because that's all the money he had. Well, the farmer quickly finds out that this giant is super strong and he can hook up the yoke of an ox and plow the fields by himself. He can do things that normal men can't do. Well, when he connects to one of the other plantations, the other people that are in servitude, they know what he is because they live on the island. They're from the island, so they recognize him as being a giant, so they get freaked out. So for a while, they won't even talk to him, but finally they start interacting with him, and he starts realizing, just like they do, that they both have the same type of goals, and they're both very human in nature, and they both have big hearts. They both have a whole different way of looking at things, even though the giants on the island are eating the people. So Luddy realizes that that's not something that they probably should be doing anymore, because he realized that they're not just animals, that they can communicate just like they can. So long story short, finds a way off the island as a part of this deal that he makes with the farmer. The farmer takes him into town in Queensland, and there's a amateur boxing. So this group of amateur boxers will come around and they will set up shop, and then people can come and challenge them. And of course, there's bets being made. Well, the farmer takes all his money out and puts it on Luddy Makoti to take on this dude from Germany. So they are in there, and they allow him to come in, even though he's a slave. They allow him to come in and fight this fight because they think he's just going to get beat up. And the guy, while Luddy's back's turned, goes to hit him in the back, and Luddy turns around and hits him so hard that his fist goes through his chest. And
Oh my God.
kills the guy. And the good thing for Luddy is it was under Queensberry rules. So Queensberry rules are, if you are in the ring and you die, then you die because you have basically sign the waiver over to whatever happens in this, ring uh, happens. So he's okay. The police come investigate. They're like, hey, this is all in the up and up. Well, the farmer wins a ton of money, and he ends up letting McCody go, along with a couple of other uh, servants from the other plantation to go with him. He gets back to the island. He goes back to his family, and he tells them, listen, we got to stop eating people. Like, this is not something that, as giants, that we need to continue with. And it actually starts the catalyst what's called the Giant Wars, when Letty McCody takes over this group of giants after his father passes, and he wars with the Western giants on the western side of Guadalcanal, and they end up battling it out, and Letty McCode and his brothers end up winning. And as a part of them winning, they end up making peace treaties with all of the human tribes in the area. And to this day, people have these pipes that Letty McCody gave to them as a sign of a peace offering, that they would no longer eat the people again. So you may say, well, this is a fantastic story. Is there any truth to it? Well, the SIBC, which is the Solomon Island Broadcasting System, in I think it was in 2002, they reported on their radio station that Letty McCody met with one of the Anglican bishops to talk about the racial wars that were going on that had nothing to do with the Giants, and asking Letty McCody's advice about what they needed to do to stop all this. So this was reported on an actual broadcasting radio station. So that was the link that got us to know that, well, at least there was something going on with a Letty McCody somewhere, even though that, people from the outside world hadn't seen him, but plenty of people on the island had seen him, and plenty of other giants as well.
Wow, this is fascinating. This really is. And I just remembered, I guess, the explorer, I think his name was Magellan, who encountered the giants off of Patagonia back in the day. I think
Yep.
that happened somewhere in like the 1890s or something. So it's weird that like these giants are like showing up in like isolated pockets of the world where, a lot of people wouldn't look for them. You know what I mean? It's almost like they've flocked to those areas, and like they knew, it's almost like they knew where society wasn't going to thrive or something like that. Like, for example, like they've been there all this time, but like North America's built up, and South America, Brazil, all this stuff, and like all these other places, China, Japan, you know what I mean? But like they picked. Something. Sorry, I'm an idiot. Anyway, they pick these places where it's like isolated to the world, and I truly believe they're there. I really do. I feel like a lot of really weird stuff goes on in these places. Like for example, I've told this story on my show before. That there was this guy. I was listening to an old Dreamland with Whitley Strieber, and this doesn't have to do with giants. It's about weird things that happen in like isolated places. And this guy went to Indonesia. His name was Alan Lammers. If you ever get to listen to the Dreamland, this is fascinating. He was going to Indonesia to set up radio communications because something with their logging system and the government or something like that. So when he gets there, he's told that in the jungle he can only wear black because he said if people wear colors, they get attacked by something. And he said one guy had yellow socks on one day, and they're walking through the jungle, and something invisible bit him in his leg, and the guy like went into like seizures that night, and he projectile vomited across the room and stuff like that. Well, then the situation gets crazier because then they find out from some of the natives that there's these beings that are like similar to like a gray alien that like live in the mountains or something, and they abduct people, and sometimes they take people and they don't bring them back, but sometimes they'll take people and heal them. So like a real weird dichotomy. Like why would that be? It's almost like they, like I don't know, like they take people and they do what they want with them. Almost like they heal them or they just take them if they want to just take them. I found that fascinating though. Like so, it seems like a lot of weird stuff happens in like isolated places. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things about the Solomon Islands, and they talk about it there on the islands that there was a larger landmass that was actually a part of the original islands. It was a giant landmass, and they think that's where Mu was at, or one of the many Atlantises that have been talked about throughout history. So what I thought was, well, that would make sense if you had an ancient civilization, a highly technological civilization, probably had some sort of connection to Nephilim or giants. And if that's the case, then these would probably be the remnants from that era. They just went underground because one of the things they talk about in the Solomon Islands, there are tunneling systems that connect all of the islands. So these 1,000 islands are literally 1,000 islands. They're all connected through tunneling systems. So these giants are underground, and they can move between islands if they want to.
That's oh my. So there's so there's like actual like tunneling systems underneath the earth and stuff.
Yep.
So do you think there's civilizations underneath the earth? I mean, we know there's the DUMBs, right? The deep underground military bases. But I wonder. I mean, because there's this another. I don't know how much to believe of this, but there's this woman on YouTube. Her name's Reptilian Hybrid Housewife. I talk about this all the time too. I like all the weird. This is why I like having you on the show, because I love talking about the weird, like mysterious, like stuff that like just like the fascinating stuff. Anyway, she claims to be a reptilian hybrid, but she showed pictures of underground. She showed videos of people going into like what looks like they're going into inner Earth. Like trucks that take supplies down there, and people have asked the drivers, "Where are you going?" and they won't respond. So it's very strange. And she showed like pictures of like underground cities that looked like immaculate. I don't know how real they are. But it seems like definitely a lot's going on underground, more than we think. I wonder what's under there. I wonder sometimes if there's like actual like lakes or oceans and vegetation, and it's just a whole other world that we're not privy to.
Yeah, I would think that there would definitely be a possibility for that. I mean, one of the things we can actually talk about is the, mammoth cave systems here in the US. Nobody knows how big it actually is. That's the crazy thing about it. Some maps that have been drawn by geologists have suggested that the mammoth caves go all the way from Kentucky to California and all the way up to
Oh,
Canada. So if you're looking at a cave system that's that deep under the earth, that's that massive, we don't even have to talk about hollow earth, because that could be a possibility. But let's just say there are tons of these massive cavernous systems which are provable by modern science. We don't know what's going on down there. I mean, think about all of the cryptids that come out of cave systems, especially the mammoth caves, because you've got stuff like the Dover Demon, you've got tons of UFO sightings that come out of there, and they all kind of look the same. These little bodies, big heads, this humanoid like presence that they look like. And I think they're either the version of something that's being experimented on, or they are the thing that is experimenting. So I think you probably got a little bit of both. And I don't think you're off in thinking that if we're going to suggest that there are things coming out from underneath the ground, that there couldn't be civilizations there. Listen, every culture in ancient history has talked about there being underground civilizations. We know that. We know that anytime we've heard of any ancient uh people talking about reptilians, they're coming from where? They're coming from out from under the earth. We giants coming out from under the earth. All of these different cryptids, Bigfoot, Dogmen, all of these different ones, they're coming out from under the earth. So there has to be something to it, right? We can't just dismiss it and say that it's nothing to it, because people, just regular people that aren't even into this stuff like you and I are, have seen this stuff. And that's changed their whole paradigm on how they look at life, because they're seeing something weird they've never seen before that they can't even wrap their mind around, coming out from underneath the earth. So, yeah, I don't think you're off to think that.
so you think that's where most of the cryptids are coming from, is under the earth? And do you believe in like the weird cryptids? Like did you ever hear of like, for example, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is like there's a couple of researchers like Stan Gordon and Ron Murphy. They've been researching cryptids for a long time, and they talk about the stuff that we have here in Pennsylvania. Like supposedly we have giant thunderbirds, and we get Black Panther sightings, which there's no way Black Panthers are supposed to be here. We have stories of the Owlman, which is really weird. Not much proof of it, and then obviously the flying humanoids, Dogman, Bigfoot. And then you go up in Jersey, they have the Jersey Devil, and so it's just like there's a lot of them. I think they're all very real too. I really do. I mean, you're a cryptid researcher. Like, what do you feel about like most of the cryptids you hear about? Do you think they're all pretty, you know, like pretty valid?
I think there has to be something to it. There's no other way to look at it,
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, you're looking at real people who are having these real experiences, who are seeing these things, and they are coming forth and telling other people about it. So, yeah, I do think there's something to it. Now, I want to throw another possibility out there, not just coming from underneath the earth, but also interdimensionally. And I think that we have to look at some of these cryptids as being able to move in and out interdimensionally, especially when you look at cryptids like Bigfoot or Dogman, who seemingly can just materialize or disappear at will or show up in a different place. And that goes back to like Ron Moorhead's studies of quantum Bigfoot and Bigfoot being able to cloak himself. I do think that Bigfoot has a lot of traits, and their DNA makeup is something that we don't quite understand. And I think that's why that they're able to move pretty much unnoticed since, I think, billions of years. I think they've been around for a long time. I think at least the original set, right? I know there's a group of people, and especially in what I study in the Christian world, there's a group of people that think they're Nephilim hybrids. That's what they are. They're some sort of DNA manipulation, and that's all they are. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just like with anything that we look at, we have to open our mind up to a possibility of a number of different things. So I don't necessarily think that Bigfoot's always one and the same, because we can also look to the Fae phenomena and say that there are these Fae entities, typically what you see when it comes to orbs and stuff like that, but they can manifest into different forms and trick people. So maybe some of the weirder Bigfoot sightings, the ones where they're just walking off the side of a cliff and they just keep walking like they're walking on air, or if they're sighted with UFOs or whatever else, maybe they're more in this Fae phenomena of whatever this phase manifesting in front of you to trick you to seeing something that's not really there, or it's not what you think it is. So I think you got to leave that open as a possibility too with some of these cryptids. That's not always flesh and blood. It could be something paranormal as well.
yeah. Do you study the little people too? Do you like the Pukwudgies and the leprechauns and like stuff like that, and the Cherokee little people, and like I find that fascinating too. Like when I interviewed Mary Joyce, she told me that they have tunnels in North Carolina where supposedly these little people like burrow through. They live underground too. Like it seems that I can't even. I'd love to go to Inner Earth. Or maybe Inner Earth is connected interdimensional too. Like maybe they travel from there to here with portals and stuff, and they can go to like other dimensions. And I mean, I'm a big believer in parallel realities because I've talked about this on other shows. I have these very weird dreams where I'll go to another reality for like. Honestly, man, it seems like I'm there. I've told people this, and my fans are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I'm trying to figure out what's happening. I'll go where it seems like I'll be gone for like 2 weeks and I'm living a whole other life. But I'll wake up and it's only been 5 hours. So there's like a weird time differential. And in this dream, like I don't even know who I am. I can't identify who the person is. It seems like I know the people, but I don't really know who they are. So it's almost like I'm coexisting. Like I'm knowing who I am here, but I'm starting to be lucid in this dream, and I'm starting to realize it's another reality, but I can't really pinpoint what's going on. It's very strange. It's almost like if they put a mind wipe on us, it's almost like the mind wipe's wearing off when we go between dimensions. If you think that the dream world could be another reality, which I think it can be, depending on what you think of this world. And so a lot of people think we're in like a holographic reality that's very malleable. You know what I mean? And that doesn't take away from any religion or anything. It's just maybe like that's the way God designed it. I don't know, but sorry, a lot to say there. Whatever you think of that, I just
I don't think you're off, man, at all. And I do hold a lot of stock in what's going on in the astral realm, especially in our sleep. Now, I'll suggest somebody that you might want to have on your show who is an absolute genius when it comes to that. Her name's Vicky Joy Anderson, and
Oh
she
yeah, I've had her.
is
She's
an
amazing. Yeah.
absolute amazing. I'm actually going to be in studio with her this weekend, and we're going to do like a joint show on the confessionals. But she's absolutely amazing. But yeah, she talks about that, how that when you're in this dream world, there are entities that try to broker deals with you while you're there. Listen, man, there are times where I feel like that I'm not necessarily in another place, that I'm still in my house, that I'm still in a specific room or even in the bed that I'm sleeping in, but then something's off. I'll notice there'll be some sort of glitch or something that's off. And that's when I know there's something in there with me and it's trying to manipulate me. And she has told me before that that is a sign that you're not asleep, that you're in this astral realm, that you're seeing what they want you to see. They're basically putting up projections in front of you. So I do think there's a level of that. Also, I think, to your point, I think, yeah, in your astral body, if it's transported to some other dimension while you're in REM sleep or something like that, I mean, I don't put that out of the realm of possibility at all, man. I think we have to look deeper into the dream phenomena. Now, I don't think every dream is you going to a whole nother place or a
Yeah.
whole nother realm, but I do think that maybe that's the access point, right? Very interestingly enough, you brought up this whole dream world. I've been doing some research lately on REM cloning, which Donald Marshall came out and started talking about back in 2011. Now, I'll say I changed my mind on a lot of what he said from early to now, because when he first came out, I was pretty skeptical. Like, I didn't buy everything. I thought there was some truth to maybe what he was saying, that I didn't think that it was as groundbreaking as a lot of other people did, right? Because I had heard about cloning and it just felt like a lot of what he said was on the nose, and it just seemed like your typical buzzwords: reptilians, Freemasons, Illuminati, Queen
Wait,
Elizabeth,
he
just
was
the
he's
typical
secret
names
space
that they
program,
threw.
right? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Wasn't he like a secret space program guy or something like that? Like, I don't know enough about him. Or like, was he claiming to be secret space program?
So what he claimed was, since 5 years old, he was part of a secret cloning process within the government that these elites ran. And he said that he has been cloned numerous times. And matter of fact, the version of him that's out here now talking to us isn't even the original version, it's the clone version. So he was one of the first people to really come with some deeper context to what could be going on with cloning behind the scenes. Now, again, when he first came out, it was just, there was a lot of things to me that didn't add up. And I'll say even now, I don't buy everything totally, because I do think that if you are under some sort of control, say since you were 5, we also have to throw in the possibility like MK Ultra and Monarch programming when it comes to what could be happening. So possibly my original thought was this, that he came forth with whatever they MK Ultra'd him to talk about, to lead people down a false path of what's really going on with cloning and what the elites are really doing, right? That was my original thought process.
Yeah.
But I just recently changed my mind on some of it, because recently, in the past couple years, I have seen a major spike in people who have been saying that they've been abducted, but part of the abduction process is these entities are taking their consciousness and importing it into clone bodies, into other meat sacks, to put them out on missions or to do nefarious things to them. So immediately it clicked with me, the old Donald Marshall stuff. I was like, man, I need to go back through this. And recently I did. I got an episode coming out called REM Cloning. And basically, Donald Marshall talks about it. He said the Mark II clones, which are the second version of the clones, because he says there's 4 different marks of clones. You got your Mark I, which is they don't use anymore. Then you've got your Mark II. He said Mark II, when you go to REM sleep, they can transport your consciousness into another clone body of yourself, and they can do whatever they want to you or that clone, or they can send you out to do things without worrying about your original self dying, your body dying. However, if that clone body is harmed, your consciousness will perceive that your other body's harmed, and it will be harmed. You can't kill it, but you can injure it, according to him, right? This is all speculative, from what he said, but this is what he said happened. But he said it happens in the REM sleep when you go into that state for, I think the first time you hit REM sleep's like 45 minutes, and then it escalates throughout your sleep process, the 8-hour sleep process, to where I think the top end on REM sleep's like 2 hours. But he said they use those hours um, very wisely, and they know, these entities know, these vril, which he attributes to these reptilians, because he talks about the reptilians in length, and the vril society and the vril, but he talks about how they're the ones that are pulling your consciousness out and put it in these other bodies. Now, he said typically that you need to be able to put it into another clone of yourself, because then you won't have any issues, but they can throw your consciousness into another clone body. But if their DNA makeup so far off from you, you can actually go insane while you're in that body. So this is just all according to Don Marshall, right? But I'm hearing all of these eyewitness stories of people being abducted in the past 2 years that this is actually happening to. They're going to these facilities, and these entities are pulling their consciousness out and putting it into clone bodies or other bodies. And that's what keyed me off. I said, man, listen, everybody can't be lying. There has to be something to it. Whether it's, I'll even say this. Let's just say none of it's true. There has to be something happening that's making them see this. They all can't be insane, right?
Oh,
It
can I
has to
tell
be
you?
something. Either the government.
I feel like something's going on with the secret space program too. Like I know it's far off. Like some people don't believe it, but I have a lot of friends who are experiencers and feel like they've been taken into secret space programs. I have a lot of people who say they're my labs or military abductees, and then targeting comes along with that. They have like real life targeting, and it's like it's like something seems to be going on. Like, and from hearing their story, like even like if you look at like Tony Rodriguez, like for example, like his story's kind of flawless. I mean, he's got a lot of evidence about some of the places that he went to and stuff, and like there's a couple other people where their stories are just like, man, something really happened to that person. Like, and it makes you think. Gary McKinnon, he hacked into the Navy computers and he found something. It seems like something definitely is going on. A lot of times Donald Marshall's like linked to the secret space program, or like and what I was going to say is like a lot of the experiencers talk about them being having clones as well. Like like they'll say that like they went off on a mission and they were cloned. Like I know when James Rink talks about that and stuff. It's really interesting. I don't doubt anybody. I let anybody come on and tell their story. You know what I mean? But like I'm skeptical in my real life, but I don't. I don't doubt anything. I'm kind of open minded to it all. But I realize we have to be discerning too, right? Like we have to you know, yeah. I don't know.
No, I completely agree with you with the discernment piece of it. And that's what I built my whole podcast around was, go outside, touch grass, and get out of the hole. Like, don't live down there, right? Like, we can go as deep as we want to, but we still have to be able to interact with the people around us, because if we live so far down the hole, then I also think that that's the other part of what the lack of a better word, powers that be want us to do. They want us to lose hope, want us to live in despair, that there's no hope for us. And if we don't live like that, then I think that that's how we absolutely win, right? I think that's how that we build communities and build relationships and friendships with people, and we're able to build something stronger than what they can tear down. And I agree with you completely. You got to have a level of discernment, but at the same time, be open-minded. And I really like that you brought up my labs, because that is exactly what these abductees recently have talked about in conjunction with my labs. Is this REM cloning? Is the fact they're taking your consciousness out and putting it into another body and sending you out on these space missions or whatever type of missions that they're sending you on. So yeah, I think that Don Marshall was the precursor to all of what's coming out now. And that's why I went back and started doing research on him, because I said, man, maybe he was just ahead of his time. Maybe I just blew off what he said because I felt like he was some sort of controlled opposition initially. But now I'm more like, Well, there could still be an element of that, right? There could be this MK Ultra element to it, but I also think that he's probably putting out some level of truth there, because there's too many people right now talking about it, and it's escalating. It hasn't died down. It's actually more and more and more and more people are coming forward and saying, this is happening to me. I'm being abducted. They're pulling my consciousness out. They're putting it into some sort of clone body, and this clone body is going out on whatever mission these entities are sending me out on. So there has to be something to it, even at the base level. If we just want to say they're MK Ultraing these people, the government's doing it, they're kidnapping them, they're MK Ultraing them to think this way, it's something, right? They're not all crazy. I don't think they're all crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I don't either. I think there's something to it, honestly, you know. And I mean, I said, go back to Gary McKinnon, you know. I'm not sure exactly what he found, but he definitely found something. What was funny was he said the government passwords were so weak to get in. He said their password was like password. But what was interesting in there is he found non-terrestrial officers, supposedly, you know, supposedly, and he found pictures of craft, like supposed, you know, ships that we have out in space, like, you know, like it's like, and then how he got out of it, he claimed to be autistic or something like that. Like I watched the whole documentary, I found it fascinating. I was like, what did he hack into, and how did he know like where to go and what to do and like what to look at? You know, and then you have to wonder, was that put out there for disinformation? You know, like because it like how did he know where to go? You know what I mean? Like I would have no idea how to get on a Navy server. You know what I mean? Like that it seems like impossible to do. You know, like I mean, but some hackers, they know their shit. You know, they really know their shit. So I'm kind of like I'm open to it, but I'm like also like you know, it's like this world's crazy. You know, I don't know. You know. Well, dude, this has been amazing. But, did you want to tell people where they can find you and all that stuff? And I'll put all your links in the description from your channel and stuff like that, and anything you want to promote. I'd love to have you back on. This was so much fun. Seriously.
Yeah, man, I had a blast. I love these type of conversations that are free flowing. And man, I'll tell you what, I love talking about cryptids and UFOs and interdimensional beings, all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of fun for me, right? And as much as I like talking about ancient history and how it connects to all these things, I do find these type of conversations just a lot of fun, and I'm able to jump through a lot of different parts of research that I've done. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, man. I had a blast. As far as where to find me, you can go to Linktree/Joel Thomas Media. That'll pretty much get you anywhere. But if you're looking for the podcast, you can type in Free the Rabbits on any platform, Spotify. You can go to Apple. You can go to YouTube, where I have video up every Friday. We put out the video at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we do a premiere. So we have a chat room going every time it drops at 12 p.m., and I'll be in there interacting with people. But yeah, we drop that out every Friday. And I've got several films out right now. You can go to merkelfilms.com and you can rent or purchase the films there, or you can go to Amazon, Tubi. Some of the films are up there too. We have more films coming out, which I've talked about. So be on the lookout for that. I also have music everywhere. You can type in Joel Thomas in any music platform, Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, and you can find any of my music too. So I got my hands in a bunch of different things right now as far as films go, podcasting, and music.
That's fascinating. And I just want to ask you real quick, why Free the Rabbits? Why the name that? Why did you call it that?
Yeah. So what really struck me about a year ago, because I stopped podcasting for a bit, about 8 months, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I didn't know if I wanted to. And to be frank with you, man, as much as I enjoy this stuff and I love research, I got exhausted with the community, because people in the community think they know everything, and
I
they think
know.
they have the answer to all these theories that are just theories, man. Like none of us have the full answer to any of this stuff.
I
And
agree.
people think that they know so much. And I got kind of exhausted with it, but I also realized that people are taking these theories as truth and they're living their lives by them. And what happens when these things come out and they're not true, then their whole life is shattered because they built everything around the shape of the earth. You know what I mean? Something like
Yeah.
that. So
No,
for
I agree.
me, it's
I
like,
agree 100%.
it's
That's why I think that's what I enjoyed most about this conversation, that you're open minded, that you're discerning. And I love what you just said there, man, because some people do take, and I feel like honestly lately the conspiracies have been gotten out of control. Like, and people are taking conspiracies, some conspiracies as reality without any proven track record of that it actually happened. You know, that's why I try to say I'm like open minded, and I'll let anybody say anything, and I'll be friends with everybody and stuff like that. But like, I like to be skeptical at the end of the day because I don't want to be tied to one box. I don't want like to say I buy into something completely and then something blows up about it. I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? I'd rather just be like Art
Right.
Bell, who like I used to love Art Bell when I was young. And like I'd rather be like him, be where he just lets the guests come on, say what they want, and let's go from there. And like see and let's talk about some weird shit and have fun. Like and not get too crazy into it to where we're like joining cults and stuff. Because that's the step where people go to. They join cults and all kinds of shit. People become spiritual gurus and stuff, and they take advantage of people and all kinds of shit.
Absolutely, man, and I completely agree with you on that, and that's why I call the show "Free the Rabbits" because I'm trying to free the rabbits. We're trying to get out of the hole. We're trying to go outside, and I always end every show with "Go outside, touch grass, and get your tail out the hole." And I feel like that's how we need to live life. We need to have a healthy dose of skepticism with anything that we're looking into. You just said the perfect word earlier, discernment. Have discernment in anything that we're looking into, and look, at the end of the day, I completely believe that there is a weird world around us. But I can honestly tell you that I don't have the answers. I might have a lot of research and I do spend a lot of time researching, but that doesn't mean that I have the answers. I could be researching the wrong stuff for all I know. Like all I know is that I like to research and I like to look at a bunch of different answers so that I can, at least piece together somewhat what's going on around me.
I agree. Dude, I'm the exact same way, man. That's a fascinating. Well, I'd love to have you back on again. Seriously, anytime, man. This was amazing, and thank you so much.
Absolutely, Rob. I had a blast, man, and I'll definitely come back on.
All right, thanks, and I'll be talking to you soon. Take care, guys. Have a good night, everyone.